Well, multiple things can be true, ladies and gentlemen. BYU has a playoff-worthy resume. ESPN seemingly has already decided BYU is not an at-large candidate right now. BYU still can make the college football playoff by beating Texas Tech on Saturday in the Big 12 championship game. And all of this is incredibly frustrating. But the good news is the Big 12 is still in a pretty good position. If you listen to my last live show, the instant reaction show on Saturday, look, the Big 12 is in a pretty good spot to get either a first round bye if Texas Tech wins on Saturday or get multiple teams in the playoff if BYU were to win on Saturday. Unfortunately, there was not enough chaos in front of BYU in the college football playoff rankings to really give the Cougars, I think, a legitimate chance at making it in as an at-large. So we're going to discuss all that. We will pinpoint where it seems to be that ESPN decided this weekend that BYU is just not a part of this conversation, and compare BYU's resume to some of the other contenders who are considered virtual locks in the field right now. Speaking of some media frustrations, I don't mean to, focus everything on this. I don't want to have that be just the only thing that we're doing here, but I was with the Duke situation, actually, what's going on in the ACC. I always say this about the ACC. If you're a Big 12 fan, be careful about laughing too much about what's going on in the ACC, which they are down bad right now. But the way the national media, Kirk Herbstreit in particular, is the one who drew my ire, has reacted to the Duke situation has me just wonder, why do people not like college football and the things that make it fun and great? Do we not have enough of the big brands already that we can't enjoy a little Duke story every once in a while? Plus, there is, I'm trying to be careful how I say this. Kalani Sitake's name has been out there for the Penn State job, okay? This perhaps is a little bit different than UCLA a couple of months ago, which is a mess of a job. I don't know why you would ever take that. We'll discuss Kalani Sitake and the Penn State rumors, I suppose we can call them right now. Welcome in tonight. It is the Open for Business Big 12 podcast. I am John Kurtz, your host. This is the best Big 12 podcast on planet Earth. If you are a college football fan, I talk college football from a Big 12 perspective all year round here on this channel. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel as you file in. Easy ways to help me do that. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. 5,400 plus Big 12 fans do right now. It's free. It comes to your inbox twice a week. And you can comment. Keep the chat very lively tonight. I'm sure it will be. You can click the $sign below the chat box to submit a super chat if you are so inclined to support the channel that way. I appreciate everybody who does that. If you're not watching live, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is a way that you can contribute and leave me a question or comment as well if you want me to weigh in on something that you're not able to express here live on the show. So there are a number of ways to support the work that I'm doing here on the channel. And I want to start with Bob because Bob hit me up on Venmo. I appreciate it, Bob. Bob says the college football playoffs treatment of BYU is deja vu of bowl snubs in 85, 96, 01, and 2020. Nothing new or surprising to me. My biggest concern is that if a team with BYU's credentials get kicked to the curb, will the Big 12 be a perennial one-bid league? I think it's a very fair concern. I think that's like a lot of people are saying that same thing. Like, what kind of precedent does this set for the Big 12 and trying to make a somewhat grandiose statement about that? But again, I would turn it around, Bob, and at least say, I mean, there is a legitimate chance that the Big 12 gets two in. Everybody is talking about BYU's at-large chances right now, and rightfully so, and how that looks kind of dead in the water. However, I mean, BYU goes and wins the game. I mean, it would be a massive story if the Big 12 did not get two in, because Texas Tech is probably going to be in the top four come Tuesday. And if you drop from 4 down to like 11 just for losing your conference championship game when they're not supposed to punish you for that, that would be a monster story. So you're basically at that point guaranteed to get two teams in. That's a pretty big step in the right direction. Getting a playoff bye would be a big step in the right direction if Texas Tech were to win, because last year the Big 12 was like in the ACC territory where late November the conversation was, man, are two G5 champs going to jump Arizona State or whoever wins the Big 12? It was a real conversation we were having. Think about the conversation we're having now and how different it is. So I understand your point there, Bob. I think there is some validity to it. However, there's also a different way to view this that is both legit and much more positive, and I think realistic for the Big 12's position right now. I think they have raised the conference's profile over the last year. And credit to BYU and Texas Tech for that. Now, having said all of that, I do want to start tonight with the BYU at-large case, okay? Last year, BYU was not a part of the at-large conversation at 10-2, and that was ridiculous. Now at 11-1, we're seeing some of the same erasure from the conversation, which is very, very frustrating. And that is what digs at me the most. I'll get to this, but this year, it is a much different bubble, so to speak, of teams that I think are playoff worthy than what we had last year. Way different, more teams, better resumes. This is a tougher decision for sure for the committee here. So I'm not here to say, hey, like BYU is just a total slam dunk and, you know, they should be in at number 6 or 7. I'm not making that point. The point I'm going to focus on most tonight is the subtle ways that BYU gets left out of the conversation by most who are having these debates nationally. And like, it's sad to me that there's like more chatter about 3-loss Texas right now after they beat Texas A&M than there is BYU, which that I do not think is fair. You know, I mean, respectfully, I saw someone bringing up Texas in the chat very early on before I had even started tonight and saying, hey, well, Texas has better wins. Look, respectfully, I don't think Texas is a part of this conversation. I mean, there was no chaos. Had there been a loss, had LSU or Auburn pulled off an upset this weekend, I think Texas would enter the conversation much more. So would BYU, by the way. But unfortunately, that did not happen because, I mean, Auburn, I know people were tweeting like, hey, if this is your first experience watching Auburn football, imagine this. But like 7 times this year, yeah, I can see how that would be quite frustrating to watch. I understand why Hugh Freeze got fired. And it did feel like Auburn was going to find a way to screw it up. And they found plenty of ways to screw it up, dropping the football all over the place. LSU, of course, they found a way to screw it up. Total defensive bust at the most critical moment of the game. And, you know, a quarterback that just, frankly, was probably never going to get that done in the end. You didn't get the chaos that you needed to really open it up. So the battle right now is basically for 2 spots. You have Notre Dame, Miami, Bama, BYU, Vandy, Texas. I will include Texas at the very back end of that. But look, right now, the precedent has basically already been set by the committee. I mean, it's Notre Dame and Alabama that are taking those spots. Both teams won. And well, I get the push. I saw Utah fans like, well, hey, we dropped a spot for beating a 5-6 team, like struggling with a 5-6 team. Surely Alabama is going to drop a little bit for struggling with a 5-6 team on Saturday. I think we both know the answer to whether or not that will happen. It's going to be a resounding no, but it's a fair point to bring up. It's a fair point to bring up. Okay, I get it. So yeah, Notre Dame, I think, is the one that I really want to compare, put under the microscope compared to BYU right now. But they're in. The only thing, I mean, honestly, if there were a team that I think has some hope, it would be Miami right now because they have a head-to-head win over Notre Dame. They just blew out a ranked Pitt, who I don't think Pitt's very good. Again, reminder, they lost to West Virginia. But I think that could, in the committee's eyes, move them close enough to then say, all right, well, the head-to-head will flip you. We'll flip you out for Notre Dame. That's the only team I could see really having that hope and opportunity right now. I don't know that anybody else has any real shot. I think it's kind of set. And we're going to have a lot of debate, and especially because Texas is a part of this, we're going to have a lot of debate, but it's not ultimately going to matter very much. 2 straight weeks we had with 0 teams between 4 and 14 in the rankings losing. So that's why it's also crowded. And like, remember the bubble last year, it was like SMU, you know, and I know Indiana was controversial too, but SMU is the one I would really focus on and say, like, think of how many at-large teams right now have a better resume than SMU did last year. I mean, I think there's like 5 or 6. So plenty of cases to be made. But here's what kills me. Okay, let's drill down into this. I'm watching the Iron Bowl last night. Kirk Herbstreit, one of the biggest national voices of the sport, starts talking about, hey, Alabama winning this game, then, schools like Vandy and Miami are going to be in trouble. It's like, that's where he goes. That's clearly where he sees the first teams out are Vandy and Miami. There's no mention of 1-loss BYU, but 2-loss Miami, 2-loss Vandy, both get some run there. Then you have this graphic, and this was definitely the most damning part of this. This is one of these that will really, really get to you. But ESPN throws this thing up on the screen for a resume comparison, clearly of, hey, which of these teams do you think are most deserving for a spot here? And you'll see it goes 8, 9, 10, 12, 14. That's interesting, right? Because 11 and 13 are both teams from, you guessed it, the Big 12. That would be BYU and Utah. And particularly leaving BYU off that graphic seems pretty egregious. Now, if you're going to tell me, like ESPN, oh, well, we were comparing 2-loss teams. BYU's playing in a conference championship game. These teams, well, you can't say these teams are not because Alabama is, right? So, it starts to, I think, ring pretty hollow there. And again, very frustrating that BYU is not included on this graphic. And this is where it makes you start to feel like, well, ESPN's just decided like that they're not a part of the conversation here. BYU is not a legitimate part of this at-large convo, even though if we start to compare them to some of these teams, let's go BYU versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame sitting there at 9, BYU at 11. BYU's got a better record against the top 25, 2-1 versus 2-2. BYU has a better best win, number 13 versus number 17. BYU has a better strength of record. BYU has a better strength of schedule. And yet BYU can't even make the graphic. They can't even make the graphic. What are we doing here, man? Two teams not even on this graphic, Oregon and Texas A&M. BYU has more wins against the current top 25 than Oregon or Texas A&M, but we're not even having that conversation. Oklahoma, look, Oklahoma's resume, I mean, being a 10-2 team from the SEC that has a win over Alabama at Alabama, I understand Oklahoma's got a pretty solid resume. They have a lot of solid wins then, right? Like the tier of like LSU, Missouri, Tennessee, teams that are all okay, not great, but okay. I understand Oklahoma's resume. I wouldn't really attack it that much, but I don't think BYU's resume is really very attackable yet. What do you see all the time with BYU? Oh, well, John, they would just get smoked. The eye test tells you that they would just get smoked by Oklahoma or Notre Dame or whoever right now. Okay, well, that's interesting. Can we apply the eye test to Oklahoma? Let's take that eye test and flip it back around on another one of these teams. Dude, Oklahoma, first of all, has an offense that is the only individual unit in ESPN's S&P Plus that's ranked outside the top 50 of any team that's in contention, any team you see on this graphic. The only team that has one of its two units, offense or defense, outside the top 50. Would you guess that Oklahoma's offense is worse than Iowa's? Worse than Iowa's. And it looks like it. When you watch them play, John Mateer threw 3 interceptions against LSU. LSU had no business being in that game. Van Buren, that backup quarterback that they're rolling out there, they have an interim head coach. Like oh boy, that's not a very good football team right now. But at home, Oklahoma's just barely scraping by. They do not pass the eye test. But I saw one person, shout out to Chris Felica, the Bear, he did bring that up. Like, hey, Oklahoma doesn't really pass the eye test right now. But outside of that, I don't see anybody talking about the eye test with Oklahoma. You see a lot of people talking about the eye test with BYU. So I'm just pointing out a double standard here. Again, which is the frustration for me. Okay. Include BYU as a big part of the conversation and stop having double standards with how you're going to judge them and not judge certain teams from the SEC, right? That's my frustration. Anyway, and last year, when we talk about last year and what happened with BYU, that was my beef. I never said, hey, BYU definitively should have been in as an at-large last year. But I did say it was crazy that Miami was an integral part of that conversation and BYU was not, when they had a wildly better resume than Miami last year, but they just weren't a part of it. Now this year, tougher bubble field, but BYU still is not nearly enough a part of the conversation. They are sort of there. They are there more than last year, but they are not nearly enough a part of this conversation. The thing that sucks is it's like if you took last year's bubble with this year's BYU resume, you might really have something. BYU might have a legitimate opportunity then at that point to be in the field, but you didn't get the matching of those two things. And I think, frankly, that just leaves it up to BYU is going to go have to pull a big upset on Saturday if they want any chance at making the college football playoff. I say if they want any chance, that obviously will put them in. But, man, I mean, they're 2 touchdown underdogs, basically, 13.5 this weekend in Arlington. So it's a tough task. And I feel for BYU fans. I feel for that team. I feel for Kalani Sitake. I just think they deserve a lot better right now based on what they've been able to accomplish this year. This is not last year's team. You know, I mean, I think that may be a part of it too for how people judge and treat BYU is that they think of what they saw last year. Okay, this is not last year's team, and Saturday was perfectly emblematic of that. Last year, they played 5-7 Kansas at the end of the year, and they lost to a 5-7 team at home. This year, they're playing a 5-7 team in UCF, and they get in a 14-0 hole. And it's like, oh, man, is this the same team as last year? Well, no. They then score 31 straight points, and they run away from them. This team's a lot better. It's got a lot better quarterback. It's got a better offense. This is a much better BYU team than what there was last year. But I think that's still jammed into people's brains, along with not respecting Texas Tech enough and some not believing like Texas Tech absolutely is a national championship contender. So that's the state of the union, I think, for BYU's playoff chances right now as they head into the Big 12 championship game. Michael, appreciate you, Michael. If you want to leave a super chat, click the $sign below the chat box. Michael says, what can we really do if ESPCN ignores the facts? Yeah, I mean, hey, it's frustrating. I will say you got a taste of, with Brett Yormark's comments during the Territorial Cup on the TNT broadcast, you got a taste of what it's like to have a real media partner like that that'll give you that opportunity to go make your case. And then the TNT guys made the case for BYU after that. They had a legitimate studio discussion about it. So again, shout out to TNT. Shout out to everybody involved there that's done such an awesome job promoting the Big 12 this year. That's what you've had just on ESPN for going on like 2 decades now with the SEC. And that's how we get to the point that we're at right now where they have such a stranglehold on things. Thank you, Michael. Bulldogs Stana. The Mormons are disrespected in the Big 12, hence BYU is disrespected. Well, okay, I think there's a lot here. This is a pretty loaded comment. I assume that this is in reference to the chance and what happened at Cincinnati. I think the Big 12 respects BYU as a football program plenty. I think you've seen a lot of love and support for BYU, the football program, across certainly. I'm judging a lot of this on Twitter, right? But Texas Tech has been a lot of support there. Joey McGuire was stumping for BYU in his post-game press conference, which, by the way, is awesome and is another one of those things that the SEC does a lot. You get head coaches not afraid to make their case, not only for them, but for others. Lane Kiffin, his whole complete tirade last year, everything that he was doing. And then obviously you saw Steve Sarkisian call it, what did he say? It'd be a disservice to the sport if Texas doesn't make the playoff. So the Big 12 needs more of that. I was happy to see it. I think there's a lot of support for BYU, the school. Now, there have been obviously heinous chants that have happened in multiple Big 12 games. And I get completely the frustration with that. And the story about the couple that came to the game that were looking for an escape after they were a part of the shooting that took place not long ago is horrific and it's terrible. I think these are just two. I would not make that connection. Now, if you want to connect, hey, nationally, BYU doesn't get enough respect. I think there could be a number of factors there, one of which is, like, speaking of coaches, I mean, Kalani Sitake is not a guy who makes his points. Kalani Sitake has been given multiple opportunities to make the case for his team. I shouldn't say make his point, make the case for his team, and he passes on it. Look, Kalani Sitake is a much better human being than I would be in that scenario. And I mean, he's clearly a much better human being than me, and I think a lot of people. But I do think that's sort of a factor. I go back to the comments from Bob, who was on Venmo with his comment earlier saying, like, hey, this has happened before. I think as a fan base, BYU, it's not like an SEC fan base of just people who are going to go crazy, right? I mean, Ole Miss had people jeering and flipping off Lane Kiffin, a whole crowd of people at the airport as he was getting on a plane tonight, right? Like, that's not BYU's fan base. I think there are a lot of reasons you could go into as to why the national respect doesn't quite come. One of the biggest is just simply, unfortunately, they play in a league that's not the SEC or the Big Ten. So I get your frustration with the chance entirely. It's a horrible thing. And I think it's an example of, like, a lot of people, college kids mainly, who just don't, you're really flippant when you are that age, and people don't understand the impact that those words actually have. And it's clearly been hard to convey that. And if you're somebody that says, hey, there needs to be harsher penalties, whether it is, bigger penalty in the game, I don't, it's like 15-yard penalty. I don't know if that's going to be enough. If there's something more punitive you can do to when it happens in the stadium, I mean, I would listen to those conversations, but I don't know if there's a correlation between that happening in the Big 12 and BYU being disrespected nationally. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan says, John, the possibility that my Duke Blue Devils could, Alan, I forgot you're a Duke guy along with a KU guy. The possibility that my Duke Blue Devils could win the ACC and keep a Big Ten or SEC team out of the playoff is why college football is wonderful. Kansas's time will come. Go BYU, Texas Tech, and Duke. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. Well, Alan, the ultimate scenario for you, if you're talking about keeping teams out, would be BYU beats Texas Tech, because that's going to take a bit away from somebody. Then you would want Duke to win, because that's taking a bit away from somebody, whether it's Duke or whether it's like James Madison, who would jump them as a conference champ. That would be very funny. That would get people whining a lot. And then I was trying to think here. I was thinking the SEC. Am I missing it? So the SEC scenario, if Alabama beat Georgia, maybe that doesn't actually really do that much. Yeah, I guess, look, Alan, the thing I would point out to you is, I think through this live, you want BYU to win, because that definitely takes a bit away from and someone in that category of Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama, Texas, Vandy. That's taken a bit away from somebody if that were to happen. Alan, I will say, I was thinking of you when Kansas had Utah absolutely on the ropes. I was thinking of you, my friend. You almost called your shot. If not for a couple bad Jalen Daniels interceptions, Kansas would have won that game. So appreciate you, Alan. Thank you for being here tonight. Guys, continue to fill up the chat. I appreciate all of you. Click the $ below the chat box if you would like to submit a super chat. John Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to hit me up there if you're not watching live. Leave me a question or comment. I'll get to it on the next show. And the other reminder would be subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. Join 5,400 Big 12 fans who already do. So I mentioned Duke, right? We have this great wacky college football thing. Duke is 7-5. It is in the ACC championship game. And this is great, right? Everybody loves the underdog. Here comes 7-5 Duke to crash the party with all these teams with gaudy resumes that have been talked ad nauseum about this season. Everyone loves Cinderella, right? Wrong. People who claim to love this sport, people who cover the sport for a living, are too cynical to enjoy Duke. I mean, the Duke thing last night turned into, it just had me beating my head against the wall. College football media hates what makes college sports great. Example number 1045. and it's Duke playing for the ACC championship. Okay, so if you're asking, John, how did we get here? ACC championship game, by the way, 10-2 Virginia against 7-5 Duke. How did we get here? Well, Duke finished 6-2 in the ACC. They lost all 3 non-conference games to Illinois, Tulane, and UConn. Yes, UConn. I mean, these are all teams that are at least solid. But Duke did lose all 3 of those games, then went 6-2 in the ACC. They had a relatively easy ACC schedule because of the 5 teams that were tied for second. Duke had the opportunity. Well, they could have played 4. They only played 1 of them. That was Georgia Tech. They lost that game. So I do get why other ACC foes are like, dude, this is BS. Duke wins on not really a technicality, but the tiebreaker that was set up was highest winning percentage of common opponents, which when you have these big, giant, massive, bloated conferences, guys, it's hard to make tiebreakers. And that's one of the types of things that you have to do is just say, well, we'll go with your highest conference opponent winning percentage. Duke won that battle. SMU had a chance. All they had to do was go beat Cal with a lame duck coach who, well, not a lame duck coach, an interim coach after they had fired their coach. Just got to go beat Cal, who couldn't play any defense at all last night. And guess what? SMU lost. So there it is. Miami, all you had to do was then not lose to that SMU team or not lose to Louisville. Miami lost games. They're not in the ACC championship. Here comes Duke. To me, this is the type of thing that makes college football great when you have a real underdog story here. It's fun. It's fun. George Mason goes to the Final Four. Everyone loves it. The entire ethos of March Madness, which is the biggest moneymaker that college sports has, it's all based on Cinderella and loving a good Cinderella story like this, right? Whether it's George Mason or it's Florida Gulf Coast, just someone winning a first round game, a 16 over a 1. That's what this is all built around. But yet, we got to hate on Duke. And Kirk Herbstreit was the first when during the Iron Bowl last night, he starts just very derisively talking about Duke and what it's, he's just like dismissing them and talking about what a ridiculous, his tone is saying like what a ridiculous thing this is that Duke is going to be playing for the ACC championship. And he was framing it as playing for a spot in the playoff. Now that's very much up for debate. Because I think it's more likely that if Duke were to win, you're going to get James Madison or another G5 champ that would be ranked higher than them because it is only the top 5 highest ranked conference champions, not a guarantee for the Power Fours that their league champ gets in. So that's just a disaster scenario for the ACC, obviously. But either way, like Herbstreit, just have some fun with it, dude. You get to go watch Alabama and Michigan and Ohio State every single week when you're doing the biggest game across the country. Like, just, you get enough of the big brands all the time. It's a 12-team playoff. At least like 8 or 9 of these things are going to be the big brands that you care about. Can you not just allow yourself to have a little bit of fun with Duke being in the ACC championship game? Like, just, they're not even likely to make the playoff no matter what happens there. Just enjoy what makes college sports zany and awesome. It blows my mind. And then we had stuff like this. And look, I like Nicole Auerbach. I do. But, I mean, I thought this was just such a bad take from her. So she's advocating for just changing the rules. Like, this might be an unpopular take, but if I'm the ACC and Cal upsets SMU, I override the tiebreakers and put Miami in the ACC championship game against Virginia. I mean, like, what you are suggesting there is to just pull the rug out from under everybody. Give them a set of rules to play by at the beginning of the year. And then when you don't get the outcome you like based on those rules, you say, well, we're just going to change the rules. Sorry. Here, we'll throw a big brand in there. After you're already disproportionately slanting resume toward teams that just get more eyeballs viewership-wise, right? You're already slanting all these advantages toward them anyway. You're going to then just throw them in the championship game based on the rules that you set up? Like, what are we doing here? How is this a real take from like a really respected journalist? And there were plenty of people that were on board with this. I mean, I saw Bud Elliott, who, again, like, I respect Bud Elliott's work, but when we're talking about guys who love them some big brands more than anything else. I mean, he's definitely toward the top of that list, and he was getting in line with loving up this take too. Now, the ACC didn't do this, okay? Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do the right thing, so the ACC did not do this, thankfully. But like, it's just like Kirk Herbstreit, Nicole Auerbach, Bud Elliott, like people who have some real legitimate influence are like lining up behind this as an idea of a real thing. That's such a bad take, man. Everything in this sport is so slanted toward the big boys and the big brands. Can we just say, like, hey, lose less games than Duke, Miami, and don't complain about it? By the way, Manny Diaz is the head coach at Duke. He was fired from Miami. He has now gotten to the ACC championship game before Mario Cristobal has, despite all this money and going and grabbing a $4 million quarterback from Georgia. Miami's fired coach gets there before them. Maybe just don't underachieve with your talent again, Miami. I hate so much of this, that this is like what the sport has turned into. It's what people seem to legitimately like. There is plenty of love to go around for the big brands, more than they could ever need in the sport these days. Just embrace a little bit of fun and kookiness and an underdog. For the love of God, man, like just ease up on this a little bit. That really got me, man. I hate that was a legitimate talking point. You can't set this precedent that like that's what we're going to do. It's such a slippery slope thing. And by the way, if you want to come back at me and say, well, John, you're the fan of a conference in the Big 12 who kind of did that 2 years ago in 2023, I will say touche. And I hated it then, and I said it then. At least at that point, the Big 12 had a bit of an out because the rule was written so clunkily. They could inaccurately, gaslighting a little bit, make the case that it wasn't a full-on rule change. They were clarifying the wording, but you guys remember that whole thing. It was Oklahoma State got into the Big 12 championship game, not just because of this, but going into the last week, this cleared it up for them. There was that random comma where it said, if not, comma, every tied team has played each other, comma, go to step 2. Not a grammatically sensical sentence. And the rogue comma became this whole thing. And the Big 12 was like, no, we didn't change anything. It was like, no, you actually did. But that's, neither here nor there. I didn't like that then. That was not nearly as egregious as this would have been. And I definitely don't like this now. And it is just this is, if you're a Big 12 fan, if you're an ACC fan, this is what you're up against. So many people in the sport have just gotten to the point where they think like this. And it's like, if it's not benefiting the biggest and the bluest of the bloods, I don't need it. I don't want it. And so much of that attitude is taken over. It's too pervasive, and it's going to get to a point where not only is it going to ruin the sport for anybody who's not a blue blood, but it's then going to ruin it all for them when they realize, oh, we actually did need the entirety of the college football ecosystem to be involved for this to be a viable product that's not just sterilized semi-professional football, just semi-professional NFL football. Perfectly emblematic of where the sport is at is what happened with Duke. And if Duke wins, whether it's Duke that gets in or whether it is James Madison or whoever, believe you me, I mean, there will be a rule. There will be a rule next year. I can guarantee you there will be a rule. Nobody will let this stand. Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, they're not going to let that stand on their watch. There will be a rule about how high you've got to be ranked, or else it just goes to another at-large or something. It'll come. It'll change. I guarantee you. I guarantee you it will. And it's going to be maddening. There are blowouts in NFL playoff games. There are blowouts in the NBA playoffs. There are baseball, little more unpredictable sport, but there are blowouts in baseball play. If you have a playoff system, it's the way it works. You're going to get some teams that blow out other teams. But taking away the illusion that they have a chance and just being included in everything is bad. That is bad for the overall health of the sport, but people are going to continue trying to do that. So, anyway, Pacific Northwest U. What's up, Pacific Northwest U? Pacific Northwest U says, I see Utah against a beatable USC in the Vegas Bowl for Pac-12 nostalgia and a WIT send-out. Cougars versus Vandy in the Alamo Bowl if they're a college football playoff shutout. Both of those are fun. I know that Utah fans would relish the opportunity to beat USC again for sure. The last one, the Caleb Williams game, right? Caleb Williams in the Pac-12 championship game when he had to beat Utah fingernails. That does seem like it would be pretty appropriate for a Kyle Whittingham send out. And dude, BYU Vandy, that's a fun game, man. That's a fun game. Bear Bachmeier against Diego Pavia. If Pavia would play, I don't know. That'd be an interesting one if Pavia would play at that point. A guy who's been suing everybody to try and get more and more eligibility. If he were to bail on a bowl game, that'd be kind of ironic. But I think that could be a very fun matchup. I'm on board. Pacific Northwest U. To be honest, I really have not. Some people I know don't like this, but I don't. Guys, I don't care much about the Bulls. I really don't. And part of it is because of what I just said. I get excited about a matchup like that, and then I'm like, well, would Diego Pavia even play? I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Pacific Northwest U. If you want to be a part of the show, you want to get your question or comment on, you can submit a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box. Appreciate everybody who does that. If you want to support the channel, just like and subscribe. If you're on an audio platform, please rate and review. That definitely helps more people discover this. And subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That is ofbnews.com in order to do that. I've got a little bit more for you here. Look, I don't know if you guys noticed. Did you guys see Lane Kiffin's leaving Ole Miss? Has anybody told you about that? Have you heard anything about that at all? Anything in the last, month? Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss. How about that? He took the LSU gig. Coaching carousel was crazy today. A lot of jobs got filled. And the Big 12 was largely unaffected. Now, I'm going to get to one major Big 12 rumor here in just a moment. But so far, despite some Matt Campbell noise at Arkansas, despite a little Kenny Dillingham noise at LSU, the Big 12 has been unaffected by the carousel. I would argue that what happened with a bunch of G5 coaches taking jobs today in the SEC, that's been a good thing for the Big 12. Hey, if they're going to go to the G5 instead of the Big 12 to take the coaches, that is good. Because guys Matt Campbell finished 8-4. I don't know if you guys realize, he lost basically half of his starting defense this year and still managed to find a way to finish 8-4. And, with where he has that program right now, it's sort of ho-hum for Iowa State fans, but historically, put it in context, it's a great year for them. Matt Campbell is a hell of a coach. Full stop. There's no denying that at this point. So him still being around right now, that's a very good thing. Kenny Dillingham, same deal. He went 8-4 this year. I saw, I bristled a bit. I was reading Stuart Mandel, his piece, which, look, I think he does a good job. I like reading his weekend wrap-ups, but he called it like a disappointing 8-4 season for Arizona State. And I guess going into the year, if you would have just said in a vacuum, no details about the season at all, hey, Arizona State fan, you're going to finish 8-4 this year. Yeah, an Arizona State fan would probably be like, oh, well, that's kind of disappointing. I thought we'd be back in the Big 12 championship game. But if I told you, hey, Sam Leavitt's going to miss almost half the season, you're going to have to play Jeff Sims at quarterback. He's going to start 4 games, play the majority of 5. Jordan Tyson is going to miss multiple games. And you're going to go 8-4 and be the only team to beat Texas Tech the entire season. That's a hell of a coaching job, man. Kenny Dillingham's got some real chops. And I know the LSU rumors started to pop up there for a little while. Would have been interesting, I guess, to see what happens if Lane Kiffin doesn't take that job. But he did. And so what happened after that in the SEC is this domino effect started to come cascading down. Ole Miss promoted Pete Golding, their defensive coordinator. Tulane takes John Summerall, or rather Florida takes John Summerall from Tulane. Alex Golish from USF goes to Auburn. That happened very quickly. And then Ryan Silverfield went from Memphis to Arkansas. And funny to bring up the Matt Campbell noise here. There was some smoke about that there had been conversation between Arkansas and Matt Campbell. And maybe that elevated Arkansas's expectations too much because, man, their fans melted down to the point where I was looking at video of, a group of Arkansas fans who gathered like outside the football facility to protest the hire, trying to like Texas A&M that thing when they wound up getting Mike Elko instead of Mark Stoops, which was funny. That actually did work for Texas A&M. Arkansas, my question to Arkansas fans would be like, who do you think you are? Ryan Silverfield seems fine as a hire at Arkansas. That was a crazy one to me. And then, by the way, Michigan State fired and then hired a coach today. They got rid of Jonathan Smith after only 2 years and then hired Pat Fitzgerald, the former Northwestern coach. So that's a job. Michigan State, right in the footprint of like Chris Kleiman, Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold, a lot of these Big 12 coaches that are kind of in that upper Midwest sort of footprint with their roots. That's a job that I would have thought maybe there's some interest there, but they clearly had something lined up with Pat Fitzgerald to go hire there. So if you're looking, it's like promote from within, G5, guy that didn't have a job. That's where the major coaching carousel dominoes have fallen so far, which is a good thing. If you are a Big 12 fan, you do not want one of these coaches leaving the league, even if, I emphasize the point on like Matt Campbell and Kenny Dillingham, because I think it's easy when it's not like the sexiest of years for their programs based on what they did last year, that they are still really good coaches, and it's important for the Big 12 to be able to keep them around. That is a very good thing. And if you're an Arizona State fan, I think this is something you need to see too from Kenny Dillingham, man. Kenny Dillingham tweeted and then deleted this, but obviously people are taking this to be in relation to the Lane Kiffin situation. Kenny Dillingham quotes Denzel Washington, who said, "Beware of destination addiction. The idea that happiness is the next place, the next job, or even with the next partner. Until you give up the idea that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are. Hashtag be a good person. Hashtag make good decisions. Hashtag have more fun working harder than anyone in the country. Hashtag lifers." Wow. Quite a quote from Kenny Dillingham there. Now, I guess, like I say, it sure seems like that's somewhat pointed toward the situation that was going on with Lane Kiffin and or the speculation about Kenny Dillingham and LSU, or just Kenny Dillingham taking a different job in general. And I would take this to be a good sign if Dillingham, I know it was deleted, but maybe this was Dillingham kind of signaling this for himself. And then people were like, hey, people are going to take this as a shot at Lane Kiffin. Maybe you should chill out on this. So, because I saw some of the comments already were like LSU fans were like, oh, well, you were trying to get the job and you weren't good enough, blah, blah, blah. So maybe that's some of what happened here. But if I'm an ASU fan, I'm looking at that like, hey, man, this guy seems like he's pretty committed. Matt Campbell and Kenny Dillingham, they don't all come like that, right? Ask an Arizona fan who dealt with Jed Fish, right? Job hopping Jed. That's a guy who wants to move around quite a bit. It's a guy who's probably disappointed that John Summerall got the Florida job. Sometimes you're going to get a guy like that. Sometimes you'll get a guy. Now, Kenny Dillingham, I know, has the pull of being an alum there, but Matt Campbell, somebody that's stuck around Iowa State for a very, very long time. We're coming up on a decade at Iowa State. So positive things, I would say, for the Big 12 there. Positive things on the coaching carousel. Now, what might be not so positive? We shall see. Okay. But there have been some Kalani Sitake to Penn State rumors floating around on Twitter, and Kalshi. I'm not sure that I completely understand the prediction market thing, but more or less people making bets on who would be the next head coach at Penn State. This came up at one point with that. Share my screen again for you here to show you this. Now, I think this has since changed, or I don't know. I saw 2 tweets from Kalshi today about who was the number one guy. Josh Heupel was another one of the rumors today at Tennessee that was coming around about the potential next head coach at BYU, that he might be somebody that's involved. I saw some Penn State guys speculating that like Marcus Freeman is this big mystery name. That sure sounds like some wish casting to me from Homer podcasters, which look, I can be too. Guys, don't take offense to that. I understand. But at least at one point, Kalani Sitake, the rumors had powered him to be the betting favorite in some ways to be the next head coach at Penn State. I was, before I talked about this, I was like testing the waters. I was perusing BYU Twitter a little bit, seeing some people I follow, and it did seem like there was a decent amount of chatter over there among people about this. I wouldn't say that it's like a lot of legitimate fear that this would happen. And that's because like I don't know, man. That seems like I don't know about the fit there. There are a lot of things with this. Look, obviously, Penn State's a phenomenal job. That's like a tier 1B college football job. It's fantastic. It does seem like Kalani Sitake has a really good thing going at BYU. With his roots, he seems much more like a West Coast guy than, I think of Penn State to be more like an East Coast sort of job. So I don't know. The fit seems a bit weird to me there, but I do know this. Kalani Sitake can coach football. Kalani Sitake is a great football coach. And Kalani Sitake, I'm sure, could figure out a way to win at Penn State with the vast resources that they have there. I also know this. Kalani Sitake as a human being, and I don't say this to say that like I think Lane Kiffin is like some terrible human being, but he clearly comes with a lot of drama and baggage, and you'd have to worry about how he would leave you or whatever. I can guarantee you Kalani Sitake would have handled the Lane Kiffin situation with much more grace than how it was actually handled, right? So if you're thinking about a good football coach who's going to be more low maintenance and not have to worry about anything like that, I could see, I'm just making the point, I could see why Penn State would at least have some level of interest. And the other thing that has seemed very clear about the Penn State search is that it's pretty vast and wide-reaching. Everyone immediately assumed it was just going to be Matt Rule because of the connection with the AD there, and that would basically be it, right? Go get Matt Rule, call it good. It seems like this has been a pretty exhaustive, wide-reaching search and pulling in candidates from a lot of places. So it would not shock me at all if there's been like some level of conversation there. But it would be pretty stunning to me, I think, if it worked out on both sides. If that's something that Kalani Sitake would feel like would be a fit for him and that Penn State would think would be a fit for them, I would be pretty surprised. Once again, you're talking about a fan base that thinks, at least some, that Marcus Freeman would be like legitimately sort of considering the job, at least right now, which I don't. Hey, Penn State's got a good job. This is not meant to be just a total Penn State fan bashing session, but that's a little rich for my blood. Some of the BYU talk I saw was, people wondering if Jay Hill would go with Kalani if he were to take another job. And obviously Jay Hill has done a fantastic job with that defense. And or would Jay Hill just get promoted to be the head coach then at BYU, which I could see that making some sense if he were to take another job. The UCLA thing popped up a couple months ago. Was that like September? I guess it must have been, because that was when Deshaun Foster got fired there. There was some UCLA talk very briefly, which makes sense. It looks like they're chasing the James Madison head coach right now, by the way. But, Kalani geographically, I think that would be a great fit. UCLA that'd be an amazing grand slam hire for them. I don't know why you would ever go take that UCLA job. That's just a total mess. Bad situation that I would not want to get myself into. And I don't know. I understand this is the reality, and BYU fans will have to accept this as a reality if they keep winning like this. If they keep putting together 11-win seasons, people are going to come knocking on Kalani Sitake's door, right? That's how it works. But it's such a great marriage. It's such a perfect marriage of football coach and personality and just tenor to the school and what the school is about and how it goes about winning, that it kind of makes me sad, man, as a neutral observer there. It bums me out a little bit to start thinking about that, if that's a legitimate possibility. So I throw it out there. because it is getting a decent amount of run right now on Twitter that I'm seeing, I'd still be pretty stunned. And I certainly hope for the Big 12's sake that does not happen. I'm going to say hello to Michael here, who is a BYU fan. Michael says, as BYU fan, it's maddening the college football playoff ignores stats. I get the frustration there, but Michael, I really wanted to get to this. Michael says, everyone loves Sitake. Hope BYU pays him. Hashtag go Cougs. Yeah, you're going to have to step up and pay him for sure. But that, that's another thing that, like, I don't worry about that a whole lot with BYU. I think they've got the resources to do that. I know some of the discussion maybe then would come to you've got a different mission, different ideals that you're trying to hold up there with the ties to the LDS church. And I guess, does it get to a point where, how much is too much? I don't know. I don't know any of the inner workings on all of that, but I would think that the money is there if needed, if deemed appropriate to keep him around. So I'm with you, Michael. I would hate to lose him. Just one of my favorite human beings to be around at Big 12 Media Days, for sure. I look forward to talking to him there every year. Gentle Brutality. What's up, Gentle Brutality? If Notre Dame played BYU's exact schedule with the exact same results, they would be projected to have a first-round college playoff bye. True or false? Well, people do love Notre Dame's quality losses. I tell you what, losing to Texas Tech would be a very quality loss. I'm trying to think what that would mean. So that would mean that they would have a better win than they have right now, because their best win is USC, who was 17, right, in the playoff rankings. And so now you'd be we're swapping it out for a win over Utah and a win over Arizona, who's going to wind up probably like 21st, 22nd this week after their win over Arizona State. So if you gave me that and just like 3-score loss at Texas Tech, maybe not first round bye, but probably top 6 or 7. Yeah, I would think Notre Dame is top 6 or 7 with that, which definitely still makes your point, Gentle Brutality. I agree with you. On that. I think it's a very, very compelling point that you're making, and that's some of the advantage that Notre Dame enjoys as an independent. There's no doubt about that. Bulls fan 2K7, Justin, my guy, thank you for being here. 2 things that shocked me this season: Houston going 9-3 and Cincy imploding down the stretch. I see that UCF still sucks. Hey, UCF did some good things in the first quarter of that game against BYU. They had BYU's defense. Speaking of Jay Hill, they had Jay Hill and company back on their heels. All right. Scott Frost, I do think he's still got some chops, man. I think he's got some offensive chops at least. But look, I know you're a USF fan. You're going to get your shots in. I'm sorry about Alex Golish leaving, Justin. That is a bummer. But I'm glad that you bring up Houston. Houston and Arizona, man, deserve big shout-outs. Going 9-3, both coaches, Brent Brennan and Willie Fritz, went from 4-8 to 9-3 this year. Hell of a season for both of those guys. They deserve a ton of love and a ton of credit. I don't think either one is going to get the Big 12 Coach of the Year. I think that'll go to Kalani Sitake or Joey McGuire, and all 4 of those guys are very deserving. But I do want to make the point that, like, all 4 of them, I'd have no problem with any of those guys getting the Big 12 Coach of the Year award, because they've all done incredible jobs. And it speaks to the coaching in this league that we have guys who are all putting together jobs that are good enough to be legit candidates. I wouldn't say that Cincy imploding down the stretch is shocking, but some of that's just like we saw it last year. It happened to Scott Satterfield last year, where they bombed and went 5-7 when they had a nice start to the season. And the schedule did get tougher. If you just looked at the teams that were on the Cincy schedule, it looked like it was going to get more difficult down the stretch. So I can't say that I'm actually stunned by that, but it was a bit disappointing when, at one point you would have had to say Scott Satterfield was totally in the running for Big 12 Coach of the Year as well. But that came crashing down to end the season, unfortunately. But hey, good comments, Justin. I'm glad to hear from you, and best of luck to USF on getting your next head coach. Justin, I have heard perhaps one of the candidates at USF could be my guy, Colin Klein, Texas A&M offensive coordinator. It's a pretty good G5 job. That might be a good step for him to go be the head coach there. So if that happens, I will be paying a hell of a lot more attention to USF football. Justin, I will just tell you that right now. Reginald, what's up, Reginald? Reginald says they're not going to allow BYU into the playoffs for one reason, to dissuade him from choosing BYU. It is simple for them to intentionally exclude BYU from consideration. Wait, hold on. So who's him to dissuade him from choosing BYU? Am I missing something there, or is this in reference to Kalani Sitake? Reginald, let me know what I'm missing here. I'm sorry, I don't know at what point in the conversation you posted that. It may have made more sense when it actually got thrown in there. But I will say, to the back half of your point there, some of my frustration with like the graphic thing at ESPN is just like, yeah, it seems like there are like these little subtle ways that not just ESPN, but anyone who's talking about BYU's candidacy from a national perspective, or just talking about the playoff spots available, they can just very subtly leave BYU out of some of those conversations. And then the debate can be fierce between everybody else. So it just gets going and going, and there's all this talk. And then if you've subtly left out BYU and no one's there to bring up BYU's case, it's real easy for that to just get, it's just a train that takes off and nobody is thinking about them. You hope that like Mark Harlan, and I understand cynical BYU fans will be like, oh, great, that's our help. Mark Harlan is the guy who, hopefully in the room can help to make sure that it's getting talked about. I know he can't be a part of the actual discussion when teams in the Big 12 are talked about, but hopefully he can be like, hey, don't forget, guys, I'll leave the room, but maybe you should discuss BYU a little bit more here. Hopefully there are some people doing that, but I think there are subtle ways where, yeah, it's really easy to just leave them out of the discussion and have people not be as engaged or as familiar with BYU's case as they should be, which is, it is quite sad. It is quite sad. Thank you though, Reginald. Zach, what's up, Zach? Zach says, for all the talk about how much money BYU and its donors have, we're about to see if they only care about men's basketball success. I'm not familiar enough with everything going on, but I have heard that like storyline or that take before. I guess it's probably because of the money that it took to get AJ DeBonsta there to Provo, along with like Kevin Young, making the Kevin Young hire, which was obviously a fantastic hire and a guy who was probably in line to become an NBA head coach. I am curious, and maybe BYU fans could fill me in. I guess my question would be why is it that the perception is they don't care as much about the football success as men's basketball success? Or is it just that we've seen them go big on spending for men's basketball and we have to find out if they're willing to do the same thing for football? Is there something more to it than that, I guess is my question there, Zach. But yes, Kalani keeps winning like this. He's going to get more offers. It's going to drive the price up on him for sure. Like you're in that territory right now. The guy's won 22 games he's 22-3 the last 2 years. Yeah, people are going to come knocking on his door. And okay, Reginald says to persuade him from BYU and to go to Penn State. That's a really interesting point that you bring up, because I'm literally on this same show right now, and I know you obviously get this because this is what you're commenting about, but I'm having the same discussion about how, man, it just seems unfair that BYU will just get left out and their resume has to be like a step above what a legit playoff resume should look like for them to even get some consideration for it. If you went to Penn State and if you were 11-1 at Penn State, I mean, think about Penn State, man. Kalani's just rocking like a Penn State resume on steroids. Penn State would have 2 of the 3 touchdown losses to teams like Texas Tech, and then a win over maybe somebody as good as Utah, maybe not, and be 10-2 and be in the playoff. I mean, that was like the James Franklin Penn State special. That's what they did every year. So yeah, if you went and did this at Penn State, and you could very easily face a schedule that would be easier than this. You get one game against like Ohio State. Good luck. But the rest of the schedule could be totally manageable, and you could roll through and just win all those games and easily be in the playoff. It's a fair point. It's a fair point, Reginald. Very fair point. Okay, guys, I think that is going to wrap it up for me. I appreciate you all being here. Couple of reminders. Please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That is ofbnews.com. And you can drop me a line on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 if you were not able to catch the show live and you have something that you want to get in. I appreciate all of you who do that. Okay, Zach, I think you're following up to what I was talking about. This is unconfirmed, but in the past, BYU has had to fight intramural sports to use their own IPF. The school doesn't treat it as BYU's. IPF. What is an IPF? Literally just Googling that. Well, this is pulling up something about chronic lung disease. So I don't know what that is. But Zach, I appreciate the follow-up there. Okay. I'm going to have to take off, guys. I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Should be back on Tuesday. I think Tuesday's it's going to be a lot of debate, a lot of people fired up, a lot of people upset. Oh, indoor practice facility. Okay. A lot of people that will be fired up and upset about the rankings that come out on Tuesday. I don't have a feeling that it will be great for the Big 12, so I'll try and do a show for you coming up on Tuesday. Oh, beating the buzzer. We got Justin. Yeah. This is what I saw. That's what I saw, the pulmonary fibrosis. Justin says the SEC decided to go get the top teams from the G5 because the Saban School for Fired Coaches no longer exists. Also, Stoops is out of Kentucky. Did Stoops get fired at Kentucky while I was on the air? Wow. Indoor practice facility. Okay. Apparently I'm behind the times on indoor practice facility. I have never seen it referred to as an IPF. I got to get on my game. Thank you, guys. Interesting case that you make there. There's no more like Lane Kiffin to just go grab off the Alabama recycling pile, huh? That's an interesting take. Or hey, Justin, maybe it's just the G5's churning out some really good coaches. I did think it was interesting. Like Florida, I mean, they just went the G5 route. They just went the G5 route recently, and it didn't work out very well with Billy Napier, and they're just going to reload that gun with John Summerall. I mean, I think John Summerall is a pretty good coach, but I would have thought that would freak out the athletic director and fans a bit too much to do that. And anyway, we'll see how it works out for him. Thank you, Bulls fan 2K7, a.k.a. Justin. Appreciate you all. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.